Good morning, everybody. It's a few minutes after 9. If you could take your seats, and we'll get started here in a few. All right, folks. Welcome to DWOG this morning. Thank you for attending the Drinking Water Advisory Work Group. We have, I hope, a good agenda this morning. Thank you for the input. We actually have a couple of topics that you've requested on the agenda for us to discuss, so hopefully we can have some good conversation about those. Just a few logistics for those people who are in the audience today. We do have a sign-up sheet if you can make sure that you signed in so that we can keep you updated whenever DWOGs are upcoming or provide any information after the DWOG that you may have requested. Also, if you are attending online, if you could let us know by email, let Mr. Sean Abels check that. It'll be the dwawg@tceq.texas.gov. And that'll be checked for questions during the webcast today, and then also we'll keep attendance based off of that and let you guys know of anything upcoming in the future that way. Also, for those here, if you have not been in the building before, the bathrooms and water fountains are just outside this door here to the left. The handouts that are available at the front this morning, if you have a chance to grab those, we will be discussing as our last program update today the proposed comparison of the lead and copper rule, and we do have the handout available at the front for you if you'd like to follow along and make sure you have a copy of that for your records. And then also there is a program flyer for an upcoming resiliency workshop that we are helping to put on to make sure that people are aware of who's in their region that can help them out in the time of need. That said, thank you once again for joining us this morning. We can go ahead and get things started with an occupational licensing update from Tamara Calhoun. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Licensing right now is running pretty smooth. Thankfully, we don't have a lot going on other than just normal updates. On the agenda, there was a licensing program included with that. If you don't have it, you can go onto the website. I believe it's there. But just a brief summary of all those numbers. In regards to the BPAT licensing program, we were up by 16.9% applications from quarter one of FY20 compared to fourth quarter of FY19. Tests administered, we were down by about 9%. In regards to customer service licensing, we were down by about 12.1% on applications received and about down by 9.6% of tests administered. In regards to water applications, we pretty much remain the same on applications received, but we did go down on tests administered by 10.9%. Everything else, pass rates, everything remained about the same from quarter to quarter in how many total licenses we have. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. And then Mr. Shannon Frazier, our PWS liaison with the Office of Compliance Enforcement for the Office of Compliance update.
Good morning, everyone. So this will be a real quick update for you. This is for the first quarter of FY20. We had 278 complaint investigations, 81 focused investigations, 54 compliance record review investigations, 32 follow-up investigations, 97 recon investigations, and 453 comprehensive compliance investigations. And these are statewide numbers. Anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. All right, so kind of get on to some of the public drinking water issues. Just as a heads up, my name is Michelle Risco. I am transitioning into the management of the drinking water standards section, the position previously held by Mr. Gary Chauvin. That leaves the drinking water special functions section without a manager at this time. If you are in need of assistance during that transitional period, you may reach out to Mr. Sean Abels, the special assistant for that section, or myself, or at any time reach out to our main line, which is the extension 4691 number, and we'll be sure to get you in touch with the correct program and get you assistance as soon as possible. This morning, I go ahead and hand it off to Mr. Joel Klump, who is our Plan and Technical Review Section Manager, and his updates.
Good morning and Happy New Year. For the Plan and Technical Review section, there's information included in the program update document. I would like to highlight a couple of those items before turning things over to Dorothy Young, who will talk to you about capacity development and TWIC. At the top of our updates, as a reminder, we let you know that the Drinking Water Infrastructure Needs Survey is taking place this year. This was mentioned at the last DWOG meeting, but this is a very important survey because the funding, the water system funding is as the sum of the state needs are used to determine the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund allotment that Texas will receive. So doing this survey carefully and correctly will have big impacts for the state. And we also want to point out that for the first time this year, the needs survey includes an inventory of lead service lines and the cost to replace those lines. And so we are encouraging all water systems with populations greater than 100,000 to begin estimating their lead service lines unless you already have a robust inventory. And if you have any questions about the types of materials that can be used to develop such an inventory, please reach out to me. We are working on some guidance to assist water systems with that. I'd also like to point out that the Technical Review and Oversight team has approved 2 new challenge tests for low-pressure membranes. This team maintains a website of all challenge test approvals for low-pressure membranes. And so this hopefully is a useful resource for water systems that are either using low-pressure membranes or considering that. Any low-pressure membrane that will be used for pathogen removal credit needs to come through my section for review of the challenge test so that a log removal value or credit can be assigned. Some parts of the state are impacted by drought, and there is a current drought proclamation from the governor, which includes 17 counties. And just to note that we are expediting the review of all submittals for any public water system in one of those counties currently included in the governor's drought proclamation. And lastly, as a reminder, as a subgroup of the DWOG, there is the Cross Connection Control Subcommittee. And this is a group that meets quarterly, just like the DWOG, and it's staggered to occur 1 month before the DWOG meeting. So the last quarterly meeting took place on December 5th of last year. The next meeting is scheduled for March 5th of this year. And for those of you that are involved in a cross-connection control program for a public water system, we encourage participation in this subgroup. Dorothy, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you and good morning. I just have 3 quick announcements. One is in the information sheet. It's the next TWIC meeting. That's the Texas Water Infrastructure Coordination Committee, which is an umbrella organization of regulatory agencies, funding agencies, and assistance providers. We meet every other month, and our next meeting is Wednesday, February 19th, and it'll be at the offices of the Texas Rural Water Association. If you're interested in attending that, representing an entity that's looking for funding or other assistance, please feel free to contact me and we'll get you on the agenda. We generally take guests around 2:30 in the afternoon. We already have, I think, the Fayette County judge coming with a troubled water system. He's trying to help, but we always can make room for more people. There's also a website, twic.org, that's sponsored by the Texas Water Development Board that gives you a lot of contact information, different funding organizations, if that interests you. Last time I talked a little bit about a new recognition category we have in our recognition program on partnerships. We'll be sending out some more information about that and how you can do nominations. And that segues into something that didn't get on your information sheet because it just got finalized. We work closely with, EPA has like satellite offices around the country called the Environmental Finance Center Network. And they're always associated with the university. The one that represents Texas is with the University of New Mexico out of Albuquerque. But that network has areas like Syracuse, specializes maybe more in financial things, and then there's one in North Carolina. And they all have different specialties, but they work together to get grant money from EPA to put on free workshops in various states. They've done one every year in Texas for like the last 6 years. This year it's usually in the summer, but this time it's going to be April 7th. It's a free workshop. It's going to be held at we're working with Texas A&M. They got us a nice facility in Temple at one of their extension research areas. That'll be the topic, the title is The Power of Partnership, Sharing Resources with Neighboring Systems. So we're hoping that a lot of folks will come and learn about what's going on around the country, where water systems are learning to work together to share either labor, equipment, emergency response, things like that. The funding agencies that are also part of TWIC will also be invited to that, so folks will have a chance at the end of the day to talk one-on-one with the funding agencies. There will also be a session on mapping assets and helping teach about how data can help you make better decisions. So that's it for me, if there aren't any questions. Otherwise, I'll stick around, and if you have any questions during the break, I'll be glad to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. Before turning things back over to Michelle, are there any questions for any items related to the plan and technical review section? All right, thank you very much.
All right, folks. Wanted to take a brief little bit of time this morning to discuss DWOG and how it's put together and what the future might look like. We would very much like for this to be a more interactive environment where it's not so much us sitting up here talking and you guys sitting down there and listening whether you're interested or not. We'd like to have a little more discussion of the things that you actually want to hear about, maybe be able to get into an environment where you have more ability to talk back to us or talk with us or even talk to us and we just sit back and listen. In order to do that, we're looking into other venues and other options that are available to us. But we also are looking for things that you actually want to hear about, things you actually want to talk to us about. I have, like I said, received a few emails with items that you're interested in, and I definitely want to make sure that we address those, but I want to encourage you to send us more in the future. The Cross Connection Control Committee is a very robust subcommittee where they get together and they can talk, and they have a lot of good work come out of that, and we'd like to have this be an option for this environment as well. So I kind of wanted to take a moment and see if we could, Stephen, could you get the handheld microphones by any chance? And kind of hear from you guys of what might be some items of interest for you in the future or right now that we can make sure we discuss, that we give you an opportunity to ask us about and for us to ask you about and see how you're feeling about those items. Because that is the only way that this is a really valuable environment for us. So I'd like to, if you guys have an opportunity to, or even a thought, to give us some feedback on how this works for you, how this would work better for you. Looks like Stephen's about set, so if anybody has any ideas, I'd like to, for a second, hate to put you on the spot, but ask you what would work for you, and we'd be really excited to hear from you.
Thank you, Charlie Maddox, Austin Water. Michelle, you mentioned venue, and that's not the only thing here. I think we as utilities need to respond back to you more, but You know, and in years past, we were in a room, it was one of the other rooms, we were like a round table. And I personally think that the setting does promote more back and forth. And when I'm in here, and I know you do this because primarily, I think, because you can webcast it from here, and that was one of the main reasons, which is understandable and good. But when I'm in here, it's almost like I'm at a commission meeting, you know, and I'm not going to speak unless I go to the podium. You know, it's not conducive to a back and forth. But then again, we as utilities and members of the group need to then give you things and ideas that we want to hear about. One of the ones, since you're asking about it now and you've got it as your last item on the agenda, and I'll say it now since we're kind of talking about it, this group is a good group to work through the lead copper rule, as we've all seen. And that's one topic, a big topic. You know, right now I think we don't know enough about that final rule, but maybe it's time to, I don't know, maybe it's time to start talking about it a bit. But when the rule is final, that's when, you know, stakeholder groups and groups where you're around the table and you can go back and forth on how to make that rule work within Texas, and as you get it from EPA and us as utilities, give you some feedback. So that's one thing I can think of right off the bat is that rule. Then we need to think about other things that, you know, we would like to hear about. But I think venue would help quite a bit too. One thing that it's just come up recently because we're doing our CCR now, or we're working on ours. Maybe hear a little bit about source water assessments. You know, last time we had one, well, last one I've got in our files is quite a few years ago. So, you know, is that just update us on that? Are we going to get another one? And, you know, when we put it in our CCR, we say we have one, but it's relatively, it's been a while back. I'm not asking for another one necessarily, but, you know, where are we on it? So that's one. So that's just my reaction to what you were saying, Michelle, which is good. Appreciate it.
No, that's awesome. Thank you, Charlie. Does anybody else have some ideas or thoughts of what they'd like to see from this?
This is Julie Huerta, City of Houston. Echoing what Charlie just said, source water is something that I would be interested in hearing a little bit more about. And also, you know, and I apologize, I've been out of the DWOGs for a while, but more opportunity to hear from water systems and what they're doing, current challenges. And I know that I'm probably just going to kick myself for saying that, but that means having volunteers step forward to do presentations on things. From Houston's side, cross connection is a big one. And then another big topic that's come up over and over for us as a larger utility is inventorying effort, not just lead related, but in general, connection counts, these big data issues, and kind of how systems are handling their records is sort of a topic that I think has regulatory impact and is also just good to have cleaned up within utilities. And I think if there could be working groups facilitated here, people sharing what they do, finding best practices, and sharing that, I think large and small utilities would benefit from that.
All right, thank you. That's twice as many emails as I got before, so I appreciate that. And some of those things are things we've also discussed as issues to overcome and also things to address. So we are going to actively work towards making that happen. I want to let you guys know that effort is ongoing on our behalf. So thank you. And for those of you who aren't huge on speaking in public, introverts such as myself, the DWOG email box is always available. Or you can reach out to us quietly in the background anytime between now and our next DWOG or anytime thereafter when you have an idea. So thank you very much for your feedback on that. I do want to touch on a few of the things that are kind of sitting out there for the two drinking water sections in the interim. One of those is OEA, the America's Water Infrastructure Act of 2018, and its requirement for emergency response plans. There has been some confusion. I know that in this forum I've introduced in the past that we did workshops for that to encourage people and help them to learn how to do their vulnerability assessments and then also do their all hazards analysis, which is required as an ERP. I did want to make sure that we draw a line pretty clearly. We are doing an outreach effort and education through TCEQ, but the requirement for the ERP is actually a direct federal requirement. There's no need for us to know that you did your ERP. There's no need to certify to us that you did your ERP. There's actually a website that the EPA manages where you will go on and certify to them that you've done your ERP. So just to let you know, since we haven't had a few pieces of paperwork and certifications trickle into us, we are not the ones accountable for that. We are not the ones that we should even really know that. That's not a conversation. We're here to help you make it happen. We're here to help you comply. But that compliance is not something we're running or in charge of. So if you need any more details on where to go to certify, let me know. We'll get you the direct link and you can go online. It's a quick online process. So I'd like to draw that line there for you. Another thing that's coming in the OEA, and I know that somebody had reached out to me for a little more information about this, is the CCR requirements that were part of the OEA requirement. So when you read carefully, Section 2008 covers the consumer confidence rule. It includes both the fact that systems who serve 10,000 or more persons will need to issue that report twice per year. It also indicates that readability must improve and that electronic means must be required. It also gives the federal government, although the statute exists, 2 years to propose rulemaking as to how that will happen. So for those of you who are biting your fingers and you're concerned about what's going to happen this year because, 18 plus 2 equals 2020, no worries at this moment in time. We do not have direction from them, and they have not published a rule, which in theory is a requirement that by October of this year. And when that does come down the line, similar to how the lead and copper rule proposals are coming down the line, we'll have a response period, there'll be a formal comment period, there'll be an actual final rule. Then that rule will get codified for us here in the state of Texas, and we'll be telling you how you need to comply with that. And they'd be giving us the timelines for when that compliance would need to occur. I would encourage you in the interim to really look at the readability of your reports. That's the number one concern I hear from citizens. Whenever the next WOG comes around, we'll probably be talking about CCR and the top 10 issues that arise from a CCR, because there are only so many and they're all the same. So we can try and give you a couple of heads up so that way you don't fall into those pit traps, because it only takes 1 or 2 people to be very concerned about it and make it a big issue for any water system. So in your minds, if you can, be looking at readability and how easily people can understand. There are some good references out there from other states, and we're hoping to put some forward of our own about how to put some guidelines on your charts and how to put them together, and also a guide for them in the CCR on how to read the charts. But then also to make sure that your commentary is all correct. Some of the notes and footnotes and those types of things are very confusing to people, and those are the main reasons we get phone calls. So if you can, in the interim, concentrate on your readability. Readability is subjective. I don't know how they're going to codify readability, but I would encourage you to take a look at that. And additionally, the twice per year requirement. We have no guidance at this time how that will happen, but I would encourage you to look at, okay, what would it take for you to do a report twice a year? Just work through logistics on your end so that whenever that comes down the pike, especially if they put us on a short timeline, it can be done in a timely fashion. As far as electronic delivery, you guys know that we already do allow for electronic delivery as long as you're following the requirements of the EPA's memo. This is just going to take that memo and make it actually into rule, or at least we believe that's the decision, the direction that the Senate wanted them to take. So hopefully nothing really big will change there for you guys. While I'm on that thought of CCR, does anybody have any more direct questions beyond those 3 items that were in the statute that I wanted to make sure I kind of gave you a heads up on? Sorry, one sec, Julie. I should have let Stephen know a little earlier.
I just didn't hear. Do you have an idea of when we'll have something to look at or comment? Do you have any idea?
Well, the statute says that they have 2 years from the day of promulgation, which they signed that in October. So in theory, by this October, but you know how timelines are. So that's what's intended by the statute.
Okay.
Okay.
Just to follow up on that, understanding is, well, October is when EPA would have their proposed rules out, I guess. Then it'll have to go through the process like we're doing with lead copper and comment and finalize it, so it's going to be, quote, down the road from October. But the main thing we need to know is we need to talk with you, watch you, or, you know, back and forth, look at where you are in your timeline of getting the CCR 2-year rule into place, and that'll be our cue that we need to do it.
Correct. It's going to be very similar to what you're seeing with lead and copper rule revisions right now. They'll eventually
Yep.
propose a rule, which in theory should occur by October of this year. And then there'll be a comment period and all that kind of stuff. There'll be a final rule posted, and
Yep.
that's kind of what we're dealing with. You also have the opportunity during that to do comments, just like you are doing this rule package.
Right. Another good time to, of course, we'll wait and see what's in that rule from EPA, but another good time to do stakeholder, you know, us as a topic back and forth about what that'll be like for every 2 years.
And just as a general comment to everyone, some of the things that have been in your CCRs for years are getting more of a fine-tooth comb look at them because there is scrutiny. So if you can, you know, you've been using the same template for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, even 1 year, please go back and take a look at it. Make sure that template is still a good thing, that it still covers your up-to-date issues. Gary, could you grab him? We have noticed that some people have been using the same template for years and have outdated information.
Thomas McGowan with Dallas Water Utilities.
Yes, sir.
One of the things we use is your template that you put out on the Drinking Water Watch. Will that, if that goes to twice a year, will we be able to check it twice a year? Because that's kind of how I verify my numbers at times.
Currently, the logistics for that are not there, but as we go forward and we get more details on how the rule is, that's probably something we want to maintain the tools we have for you guys. No guarantees at this point, but yes, that is our plan, is to make sure we keep you with the ability to do everything we're asking of you.
Yeah, 'cause that really helps me verify that I'm on the right track.
Right now, they haven't told us, is it going to be the same report twice per year? Is it going to be the new data? So we can't make any of those changes, but yeah, that's on our radar as well. Okay. All right, so moving on from CCR, there was also a discussion about data, and I want to let you guys know that we are taking a pretty good look at data right now, and some of you have actually sent in emails through ECHO, which is the ability to look at the SIDWAS-fed version of data, and found some discrepancies. So we are actively working with Region 6 and headquarters to overcome some of the discrepancies that are showing up on ECHO. I would encourage you to go out and take a look at echo.gov and check out your water system and let us know if you're finding problems. We know what we report up, and we hope what we report up ends up there with fidelity. Whatever the best way to say that is, accurately. But we do see some things that, you've resolved a violation, somehow the resolution isn't getting up there. Please take a chance to take a look at your federal data and let us know if it's different than what you're seeing on Drinking Water Watch, so we can try to work with them to get that information up there correctly, because although we'd love to say that the citizens are looking at our data because it's best, we can't guarantee where they get their data, and we want it to represent your system correctly. As Charlie and several other people mentioned, we do have the lead and copper rule revisions, and that is going to be our last discussion today. But I did want to let you know that comments are due by February 12th. Every single stakeholder, every single citizen in the country has the opportunity to make comments. So I would want to put that on your calendar, if at all possible. And then I did want to go ahead and move forward with some of our regular updates. So with that, I'd like to start with the drinking water standards section and kick it off to Mr. Casey Stinson.
Good morning, everybody. As Michelle mentioned, my name is Casey Stinson. I'm team lead for the drinking water quality team. You'll see in the program updates, we have a lot of new faces on the drinking water quality team, and I wanted to make sure you all knew who to contact for the different sub-programs within that. So I'm not going to run through that. Just want to let you know that you have that at your disposal to recommend using it. Of course, if you need anything at all, I'm always available, and my extension is 4722. Additionally, I've included the information in there on who you need to email whenever an entry point is going to be offline, either temporarily or permanently. That'll help us make sure that you don't get any bad monitoring and reporting violations. Excuse me. And related to monitoring and reporting, just make sure that your points of contact are updated on Drinking Water Watch. And as always, pay your lab fees. General reminder, the lab approvals that are done within my team, those are good for 3 years. So just make sure that if you need to get those updated, you reach out to Natalie Bello on my team. Her contact information is provided in the program updates. As it relates to the surface water treatment rule, got a few updates there. RG211 again is in the midst of undergoing major revisions. We're hoping that we'll have the finalized version by the PDW conference this year. I also have just some general reminders on the SWMOR. One of the first things is just make sure that you're using the most up-to-date forms that are available. I've included a link of where those are on the TCEQ website. Just a reminder, the SWMOR form, the most recently updated is 2017. The SWMOR2 is also in 2017. The SWMOR Alt was updated in 2019. So just make sure that y'all are using those forms correctly. Additionally, make sure that you're using approved CT parameters, your filter test parameters, all of that. Make sure that you have TCEQ approval before you're using those on your SWMOR. And that is all I had for my team. So if anybody has any questions, thank you.
One item I'd like to piggyback on what Casey said is please take a look at your letters and make sure that what you have in your letter is what you have in your SWMOR. We're doing a routine audit process to check those items, and it's great if you see something before we do. It's also a great opportunity to make sure that all your stuff is up to date. If you've added a new feed, if you've decided to use a basin that you didn't use before, if you've decided not to use that basin ever again, this is a great opportunity for you to go in and update your information to make sure it is correct. And then also if you have any changes in who you're selling to or where you're selling it or how it's coming into your plant, those are all things that you need to make sure they either don't affect your CT, or if they do affect your CT, you're getting that updated to make sure that your ratios are correct. And then finally, above anything else, is if you have old approvals, things from the old rule prior to 2015, please make sure that they are now compliant with the current rule. We have seen some antiquated items that need updated, and we have hundreds of systems, whereas you have your one that you know in and out. If you could take an opportunity to look and see that you are up to date, you are complying with the most recent surface water treatment rule, that would be spectacular. Okay. Welcome to everybody who is off of the webcast and is now back on. For future reference, this is all available on YouTube, and we'd love to hear from you. If you have any direct questions on what you might have missed or a question you wanted to discuss that was potentially missed in the gap, please let dwog at tceq.texas.gov know, and we'll try to get you filled in. With that said, Ms. Jessica Hoch, would you like to talk about your team?
Hey, my name is Jessica Hoch, and I'm the team lead for the Drinking Water Assessment Team, which includes the revised Total Coliform Rule, Groundwater Rule, and Lead and Copper Rules for anybody who hasn't met me before. So I have a few updates for the programs, and some of my updates are going to kind of are related to a presentation that Mr. Gary Regner will be doing for the DWOG today relating to holding your laboratories accountable. So the revised total coliform rule program for the past couple years has really been working closely with laboratories to ensure that we have a full and complete data set for your RTCR monthly monitoring before we're running our compliance, so that way we're not issuing violations to a public water system that actually had completed all of their monitoring, but the issue ended up being that something went wrong with their laboratory reporting the data. So we've been able to really make some significant improvements to our compliance process with that. As a part of that whole effort, we recognized that a part of the issue that we're running into with laboratories is that they're reporting their data late, or they're reporting your data late is really what it comes down to. So there's a regulatory requirement for data to be reported by the 10th of the month following the monitoring period. So, that's the 10th of every month for microbial compliance reporting. So as we are identifying those laboratories who are not meeting that reporting deadline, we're going to start noting those nonconformances to our QAPP and continue to refer those laboratories over to our quality assurance program to issue a corrective action. So that way, we're not issuing a violation to the public water system at this point. We're trying to correct the problem with the root of the issue, which is the laboratory, because you public water systems actually did your monitoring on time. But as a part of that, I think that, and I hope that this presentation kind of echoes this, public water systems are paying their laboratories for a service, and you need to ensure that your laboratories are providing the service that you're paying for. And a part of that service is adequately and timely reporting. So, we're going to do our best to address the issues with the laboratories, but a part of that, I think, needs to be public water systems taking responsibility for their data and also following up with their laboratories to ensure that their laboratories are doing the things that they need them to do, which includes reporting. And some other requirements are included in the quality assurance project plan. And so that is what we require laboratories, at least in the drinking water program, to adhere to. There's also accreditation and all of that. So as a part of that, kind of holding your laboratories accountable, if there are issues that come up with your laboratory, it's important for y'all to be filing a complaint directly with your laboratory. So y'all can file a complaint with us, and that's fine, and you can file it with lab accreditation, and I think that's really good. But the way for the process to correct the problem is to go back to the laboratory and let them know that something went wrong, that there was an issue with their reporting, that they didn't notify you in a timely manner that you had a positive, or whatever issue that you're having with your laboratory. Make sure that you are also holding them accountable yourself, in addition to our processes trying to do that. So like I said, we've got that lab accountability presentation coming up after this, so I hope some of those things will be echoed in there. And, if as a public water system, you have not looked at the PWSSP Quality Assurance Project Plan, the QAPP, I recommend that y'all take a look at that document as well. At a minimum for the microbial compliance reporting, which is in Addenda 4, and the lead and copper and water quality parameter reporting, and documentation requirements that are in Addenda 2 and 3. So those are the addendas that are applicable to the programs on my team. There's actually 10 addenda plus one major QAPP document that I highly encourage that y'all to take a look at it as well if you haven't. Because in order for you to be able to adequately hold your laboratories accountable, I think it's important to be knowledgeable of what's required, and that's one way to know. So some other sort of overarching updates that we've got. So for the groundwater rule program, I've got a quick reminder in here about triggered source monitoring, that essentially if you're a groundwater system and you get a positive in your distribution, you need to go and collect your groundwater well samples as soon as possible. And if you have multiple positives on the same day and multiple wells, you need to get one sample from each well that day. So potentially it kind of expands out. And I should have included a graphic, but if you got 3 positives on one day and you had 3 active wells going, you'd have to collect 9 samples. So it's 1 sample from each well for each one of the positives. And if you have any questions about that, you can feel free to reach out. And we also have a couple people working on the groundwater rule program that are really well versed in that particular requirement. So I've got a quick update related to the lead and copper rule revisions that will go into more detail, I think, later on in the DWOG. But I included in the program updates some links for y'all if you'd like to click into those and look a little bit closer. I highly recommend, echoing what Michelle had said, that all stakeholders should be providing their comments related to this rule and not just waiting and seeing what happens. Because you have an opportunity to say something, you should definitely say something. So we're coming up we are already started into our 6-month 2020 routine tap sample monitoring. I've got a quick summary of steps. One of the most important things is for you to sample early. The earlier that you sample in the monitoring periods, the faster that we hopefully can get the laboratories to report to us, which gives us an opportunity to review the data and get back to you if there's any issues, so that way we can avoid any monitoring violations related to the lead and copper. And that all works better the earlier that you sample in that 6-month monitoring period. Again, as I mentioned earlier, QAPP addendums 2 and 3 are related to the lead and copper rule and water quality parameters. I highly encourage y'all to read those so that way you can hold your laboratories accountable. And I think I say this at every single DWOG, this same sort of paragraph here, but yeah, again, especially in light of the lead and copper rule revisions and all that's included in those, the TCEQ highly encourages public water systems to make publicly available any information regarding your lead service line inventories and lead plumbing or anything like that. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. You can create your own web page, the way some of the cities in the state of Texas has done. You can include information in your CCR and your lead consumer notice materials and things like that. Yeah, those are some of my updates for those programs. Does anybody have any questions?
On the groundwater rule side, I had a question about CT studies and how often they should be redone. I mean, obviously, if there's a change at a treatment plant, but is there any recommendation? I couldn't easily find one in the rules about how often we might want to reevaluate those.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Here we go. Joel with the answer.
So the review of groundwater CT studies is a coordinated effort between my group and Drinking Water Standards. We don't necessarily have a rule of thumb for how often those should be revised. As you mentioned, definitely if there's any change to the treatment process, that would trigger that. We do try to do an audit on our end periodically just to make sure that what we know about the CT study compared to the type of data that we're seeing all matches up. But I guess the short answer to your question is we really don't have a guideline for that. A lot of it will depend on resources on your end for how frequently you could revisit that.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you for Julie. Kind of to bridge the gap there between drinking water standards and drinking water special functions, as Jessica mentioned, the ability to communicate out to people, in this case lead service lines, but in anything generally, I'd like to encourage you guys to do that as proactively as possible. The CCR is obviously a great place. The more positive, proactive things you can put in there to make them feel more informed about their water and make more educated decisions about their use of water, the better. But also, although it's not required by our rules, it is a facet of the public notification rule that anytime you have a violation, you can do a public notice after the fact to let them know that it's returned to compliance and what actions you took. So if by any chance you have something that has caused a stir, even if it's not a violation, if it's a customer complaint that made the news, if it's a concern at a city council meeting, you always have the ability to go behind and objectively provide them with updates on what you did and keep them monitored and keep them informed so that way they can continue to have transparency, but not only that, but trust in your water system. So I would encourage you to look at those options underneath the public notice rule. Obviously, since it's not for compliance, the way you do it is something you can choose to do. If you want to post it to your website, if you want to put it out through the media. But those are options that you can have that are your ability to positively communicate out in a proactive fashion rather than look at what the media says about you and feel hamstrung. So I want to make sure that you guys know that option is out there and it's available. We have some templates that the EPA has put forth, and we'd be glad to share those with you. We're intending to post corrective action has been taken template to our website, so you can find that there. But feel free to let us know. We'd love to help you guys keep your public informed and, if at all possible, in a positive, transparent fashion. With that said, I'd like to send it over to Mr. Patrick Kading, who has the Drinking Water Inventory and Protection Team and the Public Notice Program.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. So I just have a couple little updates for the different programs on my team. The first is that I'm very happy to announce that the vacancy that was opened when Carmen Portillo retired in October has been filled. The new staff, her name is Hannah Evans. She's been on the inventory team for a couple years now, so she's ready to hit the ground running. Her first official day will be February 1st, but like I said, she's already on the team. So if you have any inventory questions, please feel free to reach out to Hannah or myself, and we can help you out. But I'm very excited to have Hannah on the team in this new role. Next, I wanted to talk about fees, everyone's favorite fees. The regulatory assessment fee reporting is due by the end of January. So if you have not reported your revenues from calendar year 2019 for your utility yet, please do so by the end of the month. That reporting can all be done online. It's a very easy process. You just log in, report your revenue, it will do the calculation for you, and then you have the option to either pay your invoice online or you can receive an actual invoice in the mail. If you have any questions about your fees, please feel free to either send an email to the fees mailbox, which is wuFees@tcq.texas.gov. That's woo fees. Or you can also call the main phone line at 512-239-4691 and ask to speak to somebody regarding fees. They'll most likely send you to myself or Terry Cisneros. Next, House Bill 3552, which is the bill that was adopted in the last legislative session to give the requirement to public water systems to notify their customers 60 days in advance of permanently terminating fluoridation of the drinking water. That we're still going through the rulemaking process. There will be a public hearing in May, and I'll have that exact date at the next DWOG meeting, but there will be a public hearing and public comment period in May for that. And just a reminder that it has gone through legislation, so it is in state law. So if you are planning on terminating your fluoridation permanently before it gets into the actual rules, you are still required to notify your customers 60 days in advance. If you have any questions about that, please give me a call, and I'd be happy to talk to you about that. And the last thing I have is just a reminder about the annual Public Drinking Water Conference. This year it will be held August 4th and 5th, which is Tuesday and Wednesday. So that's August 4th and August 5th. And it will be in the same location as last year at the Renaissance Hotel. Registration will be open in mid-May. Once again, next DWOG, I'll have that exact date for you all. And similar to how we want DWOG to work best for you and to be most informative for y'all, if you have any ideas for presentations or things that you would like included in the PDW conference, please shoot me an email or Mason Miller an email. If you have any ideas for things that you'd like to see in this upcoming presentation, like I said, we want to make sure that it is most beneficial for you as a public water system. And I believe that is all the updates I have. So are there any questions? Thank you.
Also, as a side note to that, if you have any workshops that you'd be interested in, we're also open to other workshop ideas, especially if by any chance some of the large utilities have good hands-on training opportunities. You have rigs you've already built to teach people how to do drawdowns or teach people how to do checks of some sort as part of your cross-con program. Let us know. We'd love to partner with you to give people the most hands-on opportunities available. With that said, I'd like to kick it over to Miss Emma Jones.
Morning, everyone. Like Michelle said, my name is Emma Jones. I'm the team leader with the Drinking Water Technical Review team. So a part of what we do is sample migrations. So we deal with E2 a lot with migrating that data into CIDWIS. So kind of like what Jessica said, if you're a lab or if you could encourage your lab to submit the data before the 10th, because E2 seems to go down or go in and out a lot, and that can be frustrating. So if you can, submit your data as early as possible so you don't have to deal with the E2 issues. For enforcement, we have probably decreased the amount of enforcement referrals we've been doing, and that might be part of our pre-enforcement outreach that we started about a year and a half ago. So we reach out to systems who are approaching the enforcement initiation criteria. Most of the time they have public notice violations or paperwork issues. So we help get those resolved before we develop an enforcement case and that water system has to go to enforcement. We talked about CCR just a little bit. I do want to update y'all. We created a instructional video to submit CCRs, how to complete CCRs. It probably won't be up on our public webpage for a couple months, but it will be there, and it'll be good to view before you start working on your CCR, just to make sure you have all the information in your CCR and you don't get a violation for it. The next major thing, which hopefully I can show you, is our courtesy reminder system. So we started implementing this with our contractor. We have a staging environment set up where subscribers testing right now can associate themselves to a water system and then get reporting requirement reminders. So hopefully we can have that in production by the end of March, but we do have a testing site right now that I'd like to show you how that works. But that's it for me. Any questions?
Okay. Two items related to that. Hopefully there we go. We'll have the ability to show you here in a second on how to, in theory, use this, get reminders out to your systems. We do want some feedback from people and some testing to make sure we're not inundating you with things you don't want. We want this to be valuable to you. We want this to really help and not just be an annoying email that comes in every so often. We want this to be something that is valuable to you. We're really interested in any feedback you might have for us. And then also on the pre-enforcement side, I wanted to reach out to any of you who might be IOUs or utilities that are taking on new systems on a regular basis. If you are taking on new systems and you're not sure exactly where they stand, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd like to help you get in those new systems to yourself, things that are new to you, help you determine where you stand and how you can resolve those things. That way you're not jumping into a situation where enforcement is looming behind you. We'd like to proactively get people on the right track, and especially if you're taking over a new system, we want to make sure that you have a positive experience. Emma, if you want to try and walk them through this while it's up.
So if y'all are familiar with the just normal TCQ sign up, I say normal because it's the whole agency, but it'll be similar to that where you can either subscribe through email, or you can put a cell phone number, any phone number that can get SMS text message, or just put your email. I'm just going to put a fake email in here. Test. put that in there, you hit submit. You'll then just have to confirm your email address, just like the normal TCQ one. You can put an optional password, and then you check privacy. And then here we have the county names. So if you know your water system is in a county that starts with an A, you'll hit the plus sign here, pick your county. So you're in Anderson County, and then you associate yourself to the water system. So let's say you are with this water system, scroll down, hit submit. You'll get some additional questions here. Answer those, and then hit submit. And then you'll be receiving reporting requirement reminders such as, hey, your water system triggered a level 1 assessment. Please make sure to do that. So those type of reminders. Let me see if there's anything else. That's about it right now. It will be categorized by county, by your primary county for your water system. So you'll just have to expand the county list and then click on what water system you're associated to. You can associate yourself to multiple water systems if you do want to receive notifications about multiple water systems. It is not located publicly right now. This is just the testing part. But once it does, if you want to be part of our pilot study so we can receive feedback from you, I would love to send you a link for that to sign up. Just let me know, and we'll get that running. I believe our timeline is end of March, early April to have production up. But any questions on this? I also want to emphasize that this is courtesy reminders, so you still have to do everything. This is just a courtesy.
Good morning, everybody. Is this on? I'm Carrie Michelle Kyle. I'm the director for the Water Supply Division. Thank you for joining us this morning. And just to be clear, you know, this is to help you all, particularly with monitoring and reporting violations. You guys wear a lot of hats. You have a lot of stuff on your plate. And so we're hoping that this courtesy reminder is going to help you keep up with all the tasks and the requirements that we put on y'all. Again, I really would like some feedback at what types of requirements are the most important to you. I don't want to send you an email every 30 seconds and you become numb to it. I really want you all to give us some feedback about which are going to be more importantly. I'm not going to be able to use all of them at this time. We're going to take it in chunks, right? So that we can determine which ones are the most critical. Obviously, the health-based violations, those types of notifications or what you have, these are monitoring periods, these are public notice requirements, just to keep up with the dates so that you get a little trigger for that. So again, your input is vitally important because otherwise I'm going to barrage you with a bunch of emails that you might not want. And as Emma said, this is courtesy. There's going to be a little legal notice where you're actually signing up and you guys are going to agree to the terms of service that in no way, shape, or form that this constitutes an NOV or some type of notice. It is strictly for you all to help you keep track. Whether or not you think it's a good idea or whether we need to revamp it, it's critically important that you all give us that feedback so we can help and move forward further with designing this, okay? Thank you.
All right, thanks for sitting down in these lovely chairs for so long. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break, be back at 10:10, and we'll start our presentations. Thank you. Hey, folks, if you could start taking your seats, we'll get started in a minute or two. All right, folks, our first presentation this morning is going to be from Miss Emily Smith regarding using steers to sign up and submit your DLQOR. As Emma mentioned earlier, the closer you get to the 10th of the month, the more traffic exists on steers and E2. We are working with IRD to try and make sure you have as little downtime as possible, but we do encourage you to fill in any of your reporting as soon as you can at the close of the month to try and alleviate the press right there at the 10th. With that said, Emily?
Thank you, Michelle. How do I get it to... Okay. Sorry, guys. So this presentation will kind of walk you through step by step how to create a steers account and then to finally use that to submit your DLQOR. And then we'll wrap it up with just some frequently asked questions that I get every quarter to kind of make everybody's lives a little easier. There are 2 user guides. There's an E2 DLQR user guide. I did bring some paper copies, which are sitting over by the table. If anybody's interested in taking that with them or passing it on to somebody they might want to give it to. It is also online on our website. We also have some regulatory guidance, RG 407, which talks about disinfectant residual reporting as well. So this is the steers main screen. When you log in, if you already have an account, you can just log in using your ER account number. It's an ER and then a 6-digit number and your password. We are going to talk about creating your account. In the red box, you could click I need to create a new account. Pretty straightforward. You can also click I need my password if you want to rechange your password, reset it. You could also click I need to authorize another user's account if that is what you're interested in. So you'll click I need to create a new account. It'll take you to the applicant information page. You'll fill it all in, standard information, name, company name, title, email address, that kind of stuff. One important note about this page, there is a timer in the top right corner. You only have 15 minutes on this page before it logs you out. So make sure you have all your information handy. It's just frustrating to get logged out if you leave for any reason. It will reset, the timer resets every time you hit the next button, so you'll fill this out, you'll hit next, it'll reset to 15 minutes again. You'll fill out, you'll click next at the bottom. It'll take you to a review page. You'll review it. If everything looks good, you will click next again. This will bring you to a page. You'll need to fill in 5 security questions. Make sure you remember what you answered these with. It does ask you one of the 5 every time you try to log in, and it only gives you 3 attempts to correctly answer your question. So I know there's a lot of questions and a lot of answers to remember, but just kind of pick the ones you think you'll remember best. Once you put in your security questions, you'll click next. For steers access for the DLQR purposes, you want the program Public Drinking Water Systems, PDWSYS. There are several other options in that drop-down menu, but for DLQR purposes, this is the one you would click. Next, you will hit go. It'll bring you to the access type and authorization page. There are 3 different access types depending on the purposes of this account. There's a read access type, which would allow you to just view a report. It wouldn't allow you to create one. It wouldn't allow you to submit one. It would just view one. The edit account would allow you to view, create, delete, and modify one. So if somebody's filling it out and they want to save it, you could click the edit access type. If you actually want to submit, though, you do need that system sign and submit access. That's probably the most common since we are trying to submit these. After you click your access type, you'll pick the best description of your employer's relationship. There's 3 options. You'll pick whichever you see fit. At the bottom, there's an authorization type. So that first option, it's right above the "or." I know that it's small on the screen. There's a lot of writing. The first option you would only click if you clicked the read or edit access type. If you're doing a sign and submit role, you would need to pick one of the bottom 2 options depending on your situation. After you click your access type and your authorization type, this is where you can add your water system ID numbers. Important note, make sure you put a TX in front of that number or it will kick it back as an error. I know I get that question a lot, why it's not recognizing my system number. It's usually because they forgot the TX in front of it. Once you've added all your water systems that you're interested in submitting on behalf, you'll confirm the add, and that will take you to the account summary page. Important note, just because you've added the system doesn't mean you can automatically start submitting on their behalf. Your account is probationary at this point. You will need to fill out a steer's participation agreement or a SPA. There are 2 methods to do this. One, you can get a paper SPA. You'll hit the paper SPA button. It'll generate your SPA. You can print it, sign it, mail it. The address is on the form. An easier and more, time-saving option is that e-sign SPA. You'll click that. It uses information off your Texas driver's license. One question I get on that regard, it asks for a TDL audit number. It's a really long number at the bottom of your license. You probably rarely use it for anything, but it's just the really long number at the bottom of your license. So when you first log in, you'll log into the steers. They'll send you an email to set up your password at the end. So once you get your account number and your password and you've activated your account, you can start submitting reports. So you'll click the reporting program area, public drinking water systems. That'll take you to the E2 homepage. From there, you will click, it's really small in a red circle, you'll click water system. It will bring up a page that looks like this. The 4 choices in that box at the top. Create new reports is the button you'll click to get to the DLQR that you'll use to submit it. Retrieve saved reports. If there is a report in this folder, it is not submitted. If it's submitted, it would not be in your saved reports folder. Make sure you hit it and submit it, and it's in that view submissions folder. That means we've received it, and it'll take that into consideration. This is what the report will look like. It's very similar to the paper DLQR. If you have filled those out in the past, it's same format, same line, same organization and structure, so it's pretty easy to follow along. If anybody has any questions on the report itself, let me know and we can discuss the data itself further. Just want to reemphasize the importance of that submit button. That does submit it. It doesn't save it, but for it to count for monitoring and reporting requirements, we do need a submittal, not just a saved report. Validate and save will validate your data. You might get some warnings saying this number is higher than this number. Make sure you review those warnings. You can still submit with the warnings, but make sure you review the warnings and correct whatever it's trying to get you to correct. Okay, just to wrap up a little bit, frequently asked questions. Make sure to receive a submission confirmation email. When you hit that submit button, it will send you an email. If you don't get an email, it did not go through for some reason, so please check on it. Make sure you do get that email with a submission ID number. We will ask you for that submission ID number if we're trying to look it up for whatever reason, so make sure you have that. Don't wait until the 10th. I know we've said that several times today. The site has issues due to high traffic volume, so it just saves Y'all, frustration if you get it done before the 10th and you don't have to deal with the website's issues. In order to print your report in a kind of legible format, when you go into the View Submissions folder, 2 tabs will pop up. You want the View Water System Reports tab, not the Submissions tab. The Submissions tab will give you a page that has a bunch of coding on it, which is not useful to you. So if you're trying to print a report for your copies and your records, you want that View Water System Reports. In order to make corrections on these reports, you can't go back and edit what you've already submitted. You will need to create a new report. It will save us time on our processing side. If you would just give us a call, let us know you needed to make a correction and this is the right number of the report, and we'll go in and get that updated for you on our behalf. And then another question I get frequently, the quarterly average number, it will auto-calculate for you once you hit the validate and save. So don't worry about it being blank at first. It will get calculated. This is my contact information. If you have any questions on this or the DLQR in general, please give me a call, email me. We can talk it through. I can send you a direct link to the PDF of the user guide if you're interested in that. If you have specific steers account information like passwords, you would need to call the steers helpline at this number or email them. Any questions?
So who can submit the DLQOR? On the paper form, it has a place for the signature for the operator and his license number.
It still follows those regulations. It's still a licensed water operator. There's a spot on the form where you will type in the license number before you hit submit.
Okay, so the licensed operator still has to submit the form?
Yes.
And your license still has to correspond with the size of the water system?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question. This is optional to use steers, is that correct? for
Yes,
this
we
process?
do. We do always accept mailed-in DLQORs. Yes. If nobody has any further questions, thank you for your time.
Just as a note, we do encourage people to use the electronic version because it allows us to also see and save. One of the most common issues when it comes to consumer confidence report season is people saying, how can I fill in my disinfectant residuals? I don't know what they were. It's easy for them to go into E2 and see their previous submissions and see their numbers. Whereas if we're talking to them on the phone, they say, oh, I turned it in on paper. You guys have my copy. That's not quite how it works, and we don't have that copy there where we could help them pull that number. So we would highly encourage people, A, it goes in, you have a receipt to show that it came to us. B, it's very, very timely. And C, record keeping. It's a way to assist you in your record keeping and then also assist us in our record keeping. So we'd highly value anyone being able to make the transition to an electronic submission. Thank you, Emily. And our next presenter will be Mr. Gary Regner, talking about lab accountability.
Good morning, everybody. I asked Gary to give this presentation, and one of the reasons why that's going to be so critical for y'all is because EPA is not really happy with me. What's been happening is labs who are having late submissions, they're rejecting samples, or having issues. EPA is having an issue that I don't assess and monitor and reporting violations to public water systems. Now, fundamentally, I have a difficult time rectifying the fact that you guys don't have any control over what's happening at the lab. But there are some things that you're going to have to do in the event that I'm having problems with your lab, okay? I don't mind once or twice, that's something that we can talk about, but if you have a continuing problem that your lab is having difficulty, whether that's rejected samples, late samples, they broke the vial, their refrigerator's down, whatever the case may be, if this is a continuing problem, you need to have a discussion with that lab. One of the things that's really very important that I'm going to piggyback on is the fact that you guys submit things right the last week right before your monitoring period. So if something does happen at the lab, guess what? You don't have any time to go back and collect your sample to circumvent the problems that your lab's having. There's going to come a day where I'm going to give you the monitoring reporting violation if this is a continuing problem. So you might want to think about your business processes and when you get that stuff in, because there will come a time where EPA will say TCEQ cannot do that. Right now it's a ruler across my knuckles, but there will be coming a time where they are absolutely adamant that the public water system, because we didn't receive that data, receives a monitoring reporting violation. So please pay close attention, have a little bit more communication with your lab, and make sure that you're getting those in just enough time for you to go out and recollect that sample in the event that something happens at the lab and it fails, okay? Thanks, guys.
Good morning. My name is Garrett Regner. I'm the Quality Assurance Specialist for the Public Water System Supervision Program. This presentation is pretty much the same as the one I did at the Drinking Water Conference. However, I don't think we had a very good description of what it was going to be about. We didn't get a lot of attendance, plus it was like on the second day in the late afternoon. So what we're going to talk about today is holding your lab accountable. So as the overview, I'm going to go over like what laboratory requirements there are, how to choose a laboratory or what to look for when choosing a laboratory, what to expect from your lab, do's and don'ts the laboratory should be doing, and recognizing inappropriate actions by your lab. And then I'm also going to go over what the responsibilities the PWS has, a little bit about the Quality Assurance Project Plan, and then resources for you guys to use. Okay, so what does the laboratory need to have in order for them to be able to do compliance testing? They need to be accredited by TCEQ under NELAP, the National Environmental Laboratory Approval Program, is that right? Accreditation program, okay. They need to use EPA-approved drinking water methods. They have to follow state and federal regulations, and they need to adhere to the QAPP. The lab has to hold a current accreditation by TCEQ. Drinking water methods have to be used. And the accreditation has to be in the drinking water matrix, not non-potable. That comes up occasionally where I review results that came in, and the water system's like, well, they have accreditation, but it's not in drinking water. It has to be the drinking water matrix, not non-potable water. So the laboratory has to adhere to EPA drinking water requirements. This includes following the manual for the certification of laboratories analyzing drinking water and any federal regulations in 40 CFR. So here are the different areas in the rules where you can see what the requirements are. In the state, it's 30 TAC Chapter 290. Federal, it's 40 CFR 141. And then also program requirements, the QAPP. And there's, like Jessica was saying earlier, there's a programmatic QAPP that covers what TCEQ does, but then there's also 10 separate addenda. And for laboratories, you're going to be mainly concerned with addendas 2, 3, and 4. 2 is lead copper, 3 is water quality parameters, and the 4th one is the revised total coliform rule and groundwater rule. So you can verify that your lab is accredited, including what methods they're accredited for, by visiting the link on the screen right now. Basically, the easiest way I get to it is just search for accreditation in the search box, top right corner of the website, and then you'll scroll down, there'll be like a PDF, which is a list of accredited laboratories. If you go into that list, you can click on a link within that report, and it'll actually give you what they're accredited for under each different matrix. So they might have non-potable water, drinking water, air, etc. You can also verify on our website that the laboratory has agreed to adhere to the QAPP. The link there will give you a list of laboratories, and it will tell you if they adhere to either QAPP Addenda 2, 3, or 4. If they're not on that list, I would highly recommend that you ask your laboratory why that's not the case. Okay, what kind of things should you expect from a laboratory? Number one, they should be providing you bottles for analysis, whether that might be the revised total coliform rule. They're giving you little 100 ml sterile bottles for you to collect samples in. It could also be lead copper bottles, like 1 liter bottles for the collection of lead copper samples or for your water quality parameter. By them providing the bottles, you're ensuring that they are lab grade and they're actually, sterile, have preservatives, whatever might be required. Ensuring adequacy of monitoring forms. They need to have all the required elements on their forms, and they also need to be rejecting samples when mandatory information is missing, and then notifying the PWS. They also need to make sure they're reporting positive results under RTCR in a timely manner, and that means the same day they are read. So if a laboratory is reading a result that's positive, they need to be basically immediately notifying the PWS and the TCEQ. Very important. If the lab wants to get a corrective action, not doing that one time will get you one. Ensuring that analyses adhere to the applicable methods and they're accurate, meaning that the QC is acceptable. So the lab needs to make sure they're following what the analytical methods say, the drinking water methods, and they need to be making sure that all the QC that's required is acceptable before reporting data out. They also need to ensure that any electronic data that they're submitting to TCQ is accurate and that it's reported by the appropriate deadline, which is usually the 10th day following the end of the monitoring period. So for like RTCR, that's going to be the 10th of every month, and then like lead copper rule, it will just be 10 days after that monitoring period ends, whether it be a 6-month period or a annual period that ends in September. Okay, some do's and don'ts for laboratories. Laboratories should be providing TCEQ monitoring forms. If a laboratory is not, like for example, under the RTCR program, we have a microbial reporting form, MRF. If they're not using the actual TCEQ form, they are required to get that approved by TCEQ before they use it. The laboratory should be pointing errors out that can be corrected at the time of check-in or when they're relinquishing those samples to the laboratory. Should be checking to make sure that they have the correct and adequate contact information to report results back to the water system. They need to make sure that they're aware when a sample is for compliance, because that means that those results have to be reported to TCEQ. If they're not for compliance and you don't want them reported, you should let that be known as well. And putting the PWS's interests first, because ultimately the PWS is responsible and they're the ones that compliance might end up in a violation or whatever. Some things laboratories should not do. They're not allowed to alter any of the information on the monitoring form. Don't ask them to do that because they are specifically not allowed to. Any corrections have to be made by the person that collected the sample. So if they identify an issue when they're checking that sample in, the sampler needs to make that correction at that time by single lining out the incorrect information, initialing it, writing in the new information. Laboratory should not report compliance results past the deadline, the 10th of the month. Obviously, that doesn't mean if they haven't, for some reason, they shouldn't do it at all, but you need to do it on time. And they should not reject any properly analyzed samples, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a moment. Recognizing inappropriate actions, verify the QC. So all analytical reports coming from a laboratory should have some quality control associated, and they should not be reporting out samples that have failed QC. Verify hold times. A laboratory, once again, should be following the analytical methods, and a lot of those have hold times, so the sample has to get to the laboratory within a certain amount of time, and the process started to analyze. If a sample is analyzed out of hold time, we will not accept it for compliance. It has to follow the method. That's part of the method. Rejecting positive sample results. So a properly collected or analyzed sample has to be reported to TCEQ. If a sample is collected, it ends up positive, the lab cannot reject that because it's been analyzed as a proper sample. That's circumventing compliance by doing that. It has to be reported. Only TCEQ has the authority to invalidate a sample result. And there's a process to go through an invalidation. Like a total coliform positive, you can ask for an invalidation. You'll have to have a lot of supporting documentation for that to happen. E. coli sample that's positive, that can never be invalidated. Okay, going over some of the water system's responsibilities. You need to make sure you're providing correct and complete monitoring forms to the lab. Double check your forms after the samples are collected and before you're sending them to the lab or delivering them to the lab. Make sure everything's filled in, everything's correct. You got your PWS ID on there. You've signed it. You got a license number on there if required. You've, like an RTCR, you've checked what type of sample. One type of sample only. Don't check multiple boxes. Make sure you're recording your chlorine residual on there or any other information that's required. Make sure you're letting the lab know that the samples are for compliance so they know to report those in a timely manner. And speak up when the lab service is inadequate. If they have problems, you need to let them know so they can work on correcting those. Okay, also you need to make sure you're holding your lab accountable for accurate and timely data reporting. Again, it's due by the 10th, and accurate, valid data is due before the 10th. They can't submit like data that's incomplete or inaccurate by the 10th and then work on correcting it the next 3 weeks. That's not the intent. The intent is that valid data is submitted by the deadline so that compliance can be calculated based on that data. Always ask your lab to review the monitoring forms at the time of check-in for completeness and accuracy, because that's the time when corrections should be made. And like I said, make those corrections before you relinquish to the laboratory. And then keep copies of your monitoring forms in case there's some issue. Another thing, you should know how to check your sample results on Drinking Water Watch. All of the sample results and your monitoring frequencies, all that stuff, that you can get that on Drinking Water Watch. Recently, I think in the last 6 months, they added a page on how to use Drinking Water Watch. Also, many staff members within the section can walk you through using Drinking Water Watch if you have difficulties. Make sure you have an SOP for sampling. That's important. Your operator should have standard procedures for collecting a total coliform total coliform sample to ensure that everybody's doing it the same way and that you're going to get accurate results. Know the rules, regulations, and requirements, including the QAPP. Make sure you select a lab that's accredited and is following TCEQ requirements. So I already went over how to find out if they're accredited, and you can also follow up on whether or not they're saying that they're adhering to the QAPP. Okay, a little bit about the QAPP. The Quality Assurance Project Plan outlines state, federal, and program requirements. It applies to both the laboratories and the PWS. Any lab that fails to adhere to the PWS requirements are subjected to a corrective action. So if we see that they're doing things incorrectly, we might issue them a corrective action. And they'll be required to submit a report to us within a certain amount of time that outlines what failed, how they're going to address making sure that doesn't happen again in the future. And we need to point out that TCEQ does reserve the right to not accept data from a laboratory that does not meet PWS-SP requirements. Okay, so before we mention there are 10 addenda, the 3 that apply mainly to samples that a water system's collecting would be Addendum 2, which covers lead and copper tap samples. The latest revision also includes the entry point type sampling for lead and copper as well. Addendum 3 is covering water quality parameters under the lead copper rule, and then Addendum 4 is the revised total coliform rule. But in the recent revision to that is effective last November, that also includes the groundwater rule requirements as well. So labs that analyze samples for compliance with the lead copper rule, LCR or RTCR, must certify to TCEQ that they'll adhere to those addenda. There's a form they fill out. There's also checklists for each type of lab. So we review those to make sure they're, like using a correct form, meets our requirements. Like for RTCR, there's also labeling requirements for bottles. So those checklists, they'll go through that, also make sure they're using accredited methods, drinking water methods, et cetera. And then they submit that to us and we approve, and then there's the list online that you can refer to at that link. And a couple of resources here. We've gone over these before, but these are all on one page here. The accredited lab list, list of labs, and also the QAPP. So that page there, that second link, at the very bottom of the page, it will list all of the labs that have signed that they're adhering to the QAPP. But also that page has the entire QAPP if you'd like to read it. So it has the programmatic and all 10 addenda are on that page. Drinking Water Watch, so for you to go review your water systems information. And then the PWS information, that's the main page for drinking water that has all of information you might need as a water system. And usually things that are like important or changing will be at the top of that page and say update or new, something like that next to it. So any questions? Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. A couple of items to note that he mentioned that I'd like to echo or reinforce is when things should be rejected. A laboratory is required under the NELAP accreditation to reach out to you if something has exceeded hold time. They can still be given permission by you to run that sample and qualify the data. That does not mean that data will be used for compliance. It must be completely adherent in order to be used for compliance. If you want that to be run so that you know what that number is, so you can control your processes and make decisions based on that, knowing that it's been qualified in some way, that's acceptable for you for process control, but it cannot be used by any of our programs for compliance. Therefore, if the lab ever reaches out to you to indicate that something's being rejected or something doesn't meet the standard in some way, shape, or form, please be aware that for compliance, you need to replace that sample as soon as possible. One more reason to sample early in the monitoring period so that if that were to arise, you have the ability to still meet your monthly, quarterly, annual requirements and get those samples in a compliant fashion in time. Any other questions? All right. If you don't mind, we're going to go ahead and take a few minute break, start back at 50, and we'll be discussing the lead and copper rule revisions. If you have not, there is a summary quick facts guide that says rule proposal comparison that's available at the front of the room here. We're going to be trying to take a look at that as an opportunity to reference back what the rule proposes. And if you don't have one, there's an opportunity to pick one up on the break. Thank you.
Hello? Once again, if we could take our seats, we'll go ahead and get started on the lead and copper rule revisions discussion. All right, folks, if we can get back in here and everybody have a chance to sit down and discuss is really what it comes down to. And if you don't want to sit down to discuss, that's perfectly fine. In my request to have people say, okay, what would you like to talk about at DWAG? It was raised to my attention that people would like to have a chance to speak among their colleagues to see what are you guys reading in the lead and copper revisions? What do you, as water systems, want to work through with your other brethren in the business? And to a certain extent, what can we hear as your concerns as public water systems? So I kind of wanted to open up the floor and see how are you guys feeling about the lead and copper rule? Who would like to kind of give us a breakdown of what your worries or concerns, what you see in here is great and you're excited by, and let you guys have a voice. No excitement. Hey, you have a job still, right? Because that's guaranteed. Oh no, nobody actually wants to talk about it? Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of us can have things we want to say about the rule, but I've said this to others. I've read the rule a couple of times. We got the 300 some odd page pre-publication draft, and I read the red copy. And every time I'd start, my head would just start swimming. Will I use this one? Is it a better one? Okay. Main one. One of the ones that I think we're all looking at real hard is the school and daycare sampling. And to me, and I think the major water associations are going to comment that take that out of the rule. That shouldn't even be in there. I mean, it's going to be stated pretty much that way. And I've got a comment letter from us as Austin Water that's going to say kind of the same thing, but it's going to say that this is kind of to me, a two-edged sword a little bit, because you certainly cannot be promoting or approving or supportive of testing in schools for lead, right? Or looking at children's issues and children's health. So I think we should not be in any kind of, requirement for sampling where we could have a violation. And I know there's pieces in that rule that says, well, if you can't get their cooperation, you can document it. Well, are we going to be able to do that? We could wind up with, as a utility, with a school or daycare not cooperating with you, and it could show up as our issue in our I don't know, an M&R violation, something like that. And, you know, it's not for us to do this. This is probably mostly a premise plumbing issue, if anything, because we've looked at our schools and lead service. There's not any lead service lines for schools. They're just too big, you know. Their service line is too large a line to be a lead service line. So if there's anything that's a lead issue, it's going to be on their side. So we shouldn't be in the regulatory role where we're going to a school or a daycare saying, we have to sample in your facility. It's just not our role. Now, we could be consultative, advisory, helping them with the 3 Ts, you know, doing as much as we can to help them, support them, tell them, look, we've been complying with this rule for years. Here's what we've done. Here's the laboratory you can go to, and, you know, help them move through that. But I just don't see that that's not in our realm of responsibility, if you will. And we'll see how this goes forward. If that doesn't come to pass, there needs to be some discussions with Texas Education Agency, Family Protective Services, those that are in that role of, you know, dealing with schools, licensing daycares. I made a call, and some of you may be have more information, be more knowledgeable than I am. You can go to the Family Protective Services website, and you can search. I think it's by city, you know, and see how many daycares. I did that real quick for Austin, and we've, you know, in the neighborhood of 800 to 1,000 that you probably know about, and some you may not know about, right? Then I talked to a lady at Family and Protective Services, and just informed her, said, here's what's coming in this rule. She said, oh, really? And she was cool. She was nice to talk to. She said, well, maybe there's some way we can, quote, help out with that, so to speak, because they go through and revise their rules occasionally, and that's maybe something that they could build into something that they do. And I don't know whether you've had any discussions with them yet or not. They also ran I guess it was like a cooperative arrangement with, I guess it's State Health, the immunization piece, you know, to make sure that children are immunized, and there's requirements that they could push towards daycares to make sure that happens. So that was kind of a corollary piece to what we were talking about, you know, about a requirement of helping, I guess, Texas Department of Health, helping them out with the immunization records. Then maybe a role that could be played if this does come to pass, that, you know, we're in this venue of schools and daycares and making sure sampling gets done. But there's a piece in the rules EPA list. Well, here's questions we have for you. Well, comment on this. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And they asked specifically about this rule, this part of the rule. And, you know, should we do this? Should be advisory. And my letter's saying, yes, should be. No requirement, no rule requirement at all. So, well, that's have I gone on enough about the schools and daycare part? Maybe there's other pieces to this too. I think the rule, another piece. I think the rules seem to, and I'm not a corrosion control expert, and I understand. I know where we are as Austin Water, and all of us kind of do. Know where we are with respect to, you know, corrosion control techniques, deemed and undeemed, where we are. This rule, by some that have looked at it that are brighter than I am in corrosion control, seem to be saying this rule is like a one-size-fits-all. It seems to be going in that direction, particularly with respect to if you have to do corrosion control studies. You know, you're going to have to do a study with, you know, orthophosphate addition. We're just looking at pH and alkalinity. I'm kind of wondering, well, when we get into this rule, will we be required to go back and, you know, redo our corrosion control or do another corrosion control study? Or will we be able to be deemed without, you know, deemed good with corrosion control as we have it now? You know, and be able to show right now we're scale forming non-corrosive water, and we don't have issues with it. Will we be able to carry that forward in this rule? I'm not certain about that. The lead service line inventory, that's another piece that, you know, what are we going to be able to show for lead service line inventory that it's adequate? So A lot of us have records on that. There's going to be some unknowns, and unknowns are allowed in the rule. But are you going to get to a point where you have unknowns and that's the best information you have? Are they still going to be something you have to publish out there as an unknown to the customer? So there's some of the things that I've seen in it. I'll let others talk, but some of the items that I've seen in the rule.
Thank you, Charlie. I really appreciate you sharing that. First thing you mentioned was the testing in schools and daycares. Has anybody else looked at how that might impact their water system? Nobody else went and looked at the numbers? Okay, I was just curious to see if anybody kind of had an idea. And he also mentioned lead service line inventories. Have you guys really taken a look at the rule? You kind of know what your records are like. Does anybody, do you have a good idea of whether you'll be able to meet those timelines and requirements for an inventory? Right, so from what it's proposed, which of course that can change, it would be having an inventory of your service lines and their material makeup within 3 years. I was just kind of wanting to know if you guys were feeling like you had the records to accomplish something like that. You know?
Investor-owned utilities, we acquire small systems who have non-existent records. So you kind of, you just get what you see on top, and then you're having to investigate everything. So for our systems, nope, there are no records. So we'd be having to do surveys from scratch for every single one.
What we've done in Austin Water, and I think some of the other utilities might have these, we've got what we call a tap card. And that card's got information on that particular tap, materials that were used, size of line, meter, if it was filled out correctly. Because some of our tap cards go back to the 20s and 30s. And, we've looked at a lot of them. And we have about 10,000 unknowns where you just can't tell on that tap card. There's no information on it. So now what we're doing, and there's other utilities, I believe, I don't know whether Mary G's on the call, Fort Worth's doing this, looking in meter boxes. We're looking in meter boxes on what we see on the customer side. And some of that is limited because you might have just brass fittings going out of your box to the customer, and you're not seeing what that actual service line is. So unless you dig it up, you're not really going to know. Now, on our side, and I've been out in the field with some of our meter techs, and we've done it, and we're going to do some more of it. On our side, it's a little bit easier, a little easier, not great information, but it's the best you can get. We can dig in that meter box and look at the angle stop or the corporation stop, curb stop, and see, well, what kind of material is coming out of the ground. You might be able to look at an inch or two of material. And we've gone out and looked where we actually had about 60 that said, yeah, it's a lead service. And we went out there with our meter crews on a small meter replacement program, pull the meter, and at that time, and I was out there along with our distribution system managing engineer, we were looking at, well, what do we see coming into that meter box? And we were seeing what we call either copper or blue or red poly plastic, pressure plastic pipe. We didn't see any lead services at all. On these that we saw in the tap card, it said lead service. Now, what does that mean from where you're looking in the meter box, just that little bit of line to the meter? The only way you're going to know is if you pothole it or dig it up. And I believe that, my thought is we use this kind of, the best records you've got short of potholing and short of digging it up. And that's going to be the best you can hope for. And then you rely on, I guess, verifying or authenticating your records as you move through CIP projects, or as you're out there doing work in the field, or as you're carrying on the activities of your utility. Then you make that data, your lead service line inventory, more accurate based on what you see. but it's going to have to be, in my way of thinking, short of digging things up. And that's what we've done so far. There's some records, plumbing records. You may have some plumbing records that say, well, lead was allowed up to this time, and we've researched ours, and trying to remember the dates. It's like after 1964, sometime in there, we didn't allow lead services on the customer side. And if you can prove through your plumbing records and plumbing codes that no lead was allowed for use beyond that date, then you can look at, well, anything that's older than that, we don't have it on the customer side. And that's going to be the customer side is going to be the more difficult one. And that's where you're going to have to say, well, look at the best records you can. And maybe others might have other ideas on, how to deal with that, but it's probably going to be more, plumbing inspections and plumbing codes. Because we don't have we don't have a tap card on the customer side. There's nothing. There may have been an inspection done, but there's nothing that says what's in the ground there. So that's what we've seen so far. I don't know about Dallas or others.
Thank you again. Does anybody else have any other strategies that they've tried that they might want to share with anybody else? Everybody benefits from sharing what we know or what we think we're trying out. Anybody else? No? Okay. So Charlie had kind of mentioned lead service line inventories and lead testing in schools. They did some changing to the tier structure. Have you guys had a chance to look at that? Do you have any thoughts or concerns that you want to discuss with class, so to speak, that you might want to work through how other people are looking at it? No. Okay. If you don't have any other questions or concerns, I just wanted to give you guys this opportunity to discuss amongst yourselves. We do have the room until noon, so if you are microphone shy and you'd still like to get into to groups with some people who are in your same area doing the same type of thing, this is a great opportunity to do that. Otherwise, let me hand you off to Carrie Michelle real quick.
All right, guys. The comment period was extended for this rule. I think especially the primacy agencies threw a little bit of a fit that you're looking at something that took 10 years to develop and giving a 60-day comment period. So they gave us 30 extra additional days. It is about a 300-page rule, and along with all the supplemental documentations, I think it clocks in right at 1,500 pages. So it's a doozy. If you haven't paid attention, it's time, okay? Because this will affect you and how you run your utility, without a doubt. I'm going to have to look at gathering additional resources. There are a lot of things in the rule from a regulatory standpoint that are problematic for the agency, and so we're going to be addressing that. Lead in schools is one of them. For those of you that are not aware, Texas, we are the agency that are going to be implementing the WIN grants. And basically that is a voluntary program where utilities can come in and get monetary grants to get sampling done and to kind of work through the 3 T's process. What makes it difficult is that EPA did not think about how those two programs are going to work together, or if other states have legislatively mandated lead testing in schools and daycares, legislatively. And so, if the expectation is all 3 of those programs kind of get you where you're sampling all the outlets, think about the nightmare that will be for all of us to kind of keep track of. As Charlie mentioned, if you're only sampling 2 times in a daycare and 5 outlets, that doesn't even kind of, it's incongruent with the 3 T's, right? Which really wants you, based on tap water variability, to go at every outlet. So there are some problematic issues that we have as well. You guys are supposed to submit those samples to us, but there's no authority. There's no action that EPA expects us to take once we get those samples. Now, being that we want to make sure public health is protected, that is a very difficult spot for us to be in. There's no public notice requirement. At some point, I'm going to get a school. Once I get the sample results and I make that call over to the principal to see how it's going and to offer our assistance and help, and he decides that he doesn't want to let the school faculty, staff, students, and parents know that he's got elevated lead results. There's no public notice requirement to ensure that those folks can make decisions about the drinking water from that facility. So there are some problematic issues we're gonna be working out and talking to EPA. I don't think we have a protective, holistic approach on the lead testing in schools and the child care facilities. I just don't think it's well planned and thought out in the rule. Whether it needs to be removed or not is not for us to say. We just got to try to make it right. So a lot of our comments, or a big portion of those, address some of the problematic issues that we're going to have, and you're going to have implementing that. Lead service line inventories. You know, we're probably going to get out a SurveyMonkey to y'all and start talking about what you all have and what you can. There's not a whole lot of flexibility in this rule, and so I'm fighting for some flexibility on the state side because everybody's different. I have a lot of problems with how consecutive systems are treated. There's not a whole lot of answers if you're a consecutive system. How you're even going to get optimum water quality parameters when you've got 3 tiers of water going down the line, and how that's all going to work. And so I think there's some work EPA needs to do on the consecutive system side. Again, we might be putting out a survey, seeing what you all have, particularly on the inventory, so that we can try to come up with guidelines and instructions for you all, because unfortunately at this point EPA doesn't have those guidelines and instructions about how everybody's supposed to do this. So it might be a best practice. I know, Charlie, you've looked into it. I know Fort Worth has, so maybe we can get utilities to start talking about, because I'm not mandated for your lead service lines. I don't know. You all might have this all figured out, and we're just a little behind schedule in understanding what you all have. But I think it's important that we all start having conversations about this. Again, I think EPA needs to add some flexibility for states in their rules so that we can find something that's a common sense approach that we all can use. I certainly don't think EPA expects all of us to go out and start excavating property to figure out what we have. But you need to be careful, because if you're going to mark an unknown, EPA might come back and say, well, we just think you need to treat it as a lead service line. Okay? So y'all start paying attention to this rule, because it's a whopper. Okay? I think we probably might need a subcommittee. I know that the rule is in proposed status, but if that doesn't change and we're kind of stuck with the final rule as written, I'm hoping that EPA will take in consideration, but they're under a lot of pressure to put this rule out and get it out quickly. So if we're looking at something this summer, that's coming up quick. And you guys, unfortunately, will have to, I'm going to, while I'm rule writing, going to have to implement this, and you guys are going to have to implement it. And you know, each new federal rule is a lot of fun for primacy agencies and the regulated entities. So I think we're going to have to start planning and thinking about the big picture on this rule until the final rule comes out. And those big pictures include the lead service line inventory. That's not going away. The optimal water quality parameters, that's not going away. The find and fix is another problematic issue that we're having a lot of issues with, and you guys might want to look at as well, because you're going to have a lot more conversations with your residents when you have single sample results. And I know how y'all wear many hats. I know that resources, you guys struggle with that too. And so you might want to start considering how those resources are going to hit all of these tasks, because it's going to be tough. So let's start talking a little bit more. If it gets closer to the rule, we might want to meet and have a little more DWOG meetings that are committed to that, or a subcommittee for this. I really like your feedback, because I got to figure out how to implement it too. And if I don't have stakeholder input, you probably won't like what I have to say. But that will be critically important that we're all having conversations with this. Any other questions that you might have? And yes, we all did faint when we read it for the first time, so start getting familiar with it.
Michelle was asking us about the DWOG and I guess the setting and the venue, and making this more productive. And I mentioned that just what you're talking about, that this group is one good for working through this rule and having stakeholder meetings, and hopefully y'all can help facilitate that, or will facilitate that with this group, and we can get together and give you our input and feedback. You can give us yours, what you're seeing in the rule. We can tell you just what I mentioned here about what are we seeing in our utility, and trying to get our arms around an inventory and unknowns and that kind of thing, and we can get other utilities to help talk about this, so that when we get to that rule, or we get to the implementation part, maybe we've got that flexibility kind of lined out somewhat, or at least in mind. But yes, use this group, I would say, and for both of us. So I think it'll help benefit both of us. Do that.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Charlie. That's probably one of the issues that I kind of want to discuss. You know, we've got a lot of folks that are on the web. They can't come into town, and I realize that. But I think that it alleviates us having conversations, and whether or not we're going to form the subcommittee to have these conversations. But I'd like to get more interactive conversations. And so part of the problem is that most of the folks are on the web, and they miss out on that. But certainly getting together, if you all can make it into town, will be important. Okay. Anything else? Now that I've made you feel better about life and your jobs? Again, everybody's everyone I've talked to says it's a good time to retire. So you know that it's going to be a heck of a rule. All right. Thanks, guys, for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you, Karen Michelle. With that said, our next DWOG is scheduled for April 21st. That is long past the comment deadline, so I encourage you to take the time before then. And then also, before that deadline, before April comes, please, if you are going through this rule or anything else and you want to have a discussion about it, and DWOG is the forum for it, please shoot us an email to the DWOG email address, and we'll be glad to try and get those things together, get them on the agenda, make sure we have the opportunity to discuss or to answer any questions or to present on the information you are desiring from us. Other than that, thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for the people on the web. It will be posted to YouTube. I know that we were cut out for about an hour this morning, but you should be able to revisit it once it's posted. And feel free to reach out to us if we missed anything while you were offline. Other than that, thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate it.